Kanye's God complex versus Nietzsche's Superman. Is ego key to genius? Is it possible that the wildest, most controversial, godlike declarations of self-belief aren't just a symptom of a massive ego, but the actual fuel for creative genius? What if that thin line between being a visionary and being delusional is not only finer than we imagine, but maybe even essential to cross? Today, we're setting up a philosophical clash: Kanye West's notorious God complex against Friedrich Nietzsche's ideal of the Superman. Kanye West. The name alone brings to mind groundbreaking music, fashion shakeups, and a public persona so huge it often feels like it overshadows his art. At the core of this persona is what many call his God complex. This unshakable, sometimes jaw-dropping, belief in his own unmatched genius and divine importance. He's not just a man, he claims he's a vessel, a visionary, and as he once famously put it, "I am a god." In the other corner of our philosophical ring, we have Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century German thinker, whose ideas blew up conventional morality and still provoke and inspire us today. Central to his later philosophy is the Übermensch, often translated as the Superman or Overman. Now, this isn't a hero in a cape, it's an ideal human who has moved past traditional values, embraced their own will to power, and creates their own meaning in a universe without a god. So, here's the big question we're tackling. Is Kanye West's infamous ego, his God complex, the ultimate driver of creative genius? Is it a modern, maybe messy version of Nietzschean ideals? Or is it just a dangerous delusion, totally missing the point of what Nietzsche was getting at? We're going to explore just how necessary or perilous ego and perceived madness might be when it comes to art and creation. The unshakable self-belief. First off, let's really look at Kanye West's self-belief. It's way more than just confidence. It's this deep, almost religious conviction in his own abilities and his destiny. We've seen it time and again in interviews and lyrics. For me to say I wasn't a genius, I would just be lying to you and myself. And this isn't just Kanye being arrogant for the sake of it. He often connects this self-belief directly to what he produces, his ability to innovate and push boundaries in music, fashion, and culture. He sees himself as a game changer, an iconoclast, and that takes an incredible amount of self-assurance to handle all the pushback. His God complex seems to be his internal engine, pushing him forward no matter the criticism or setbacks. It's him staking his claim on his own value in a world that might try to tell him otherwise. Now let's switch over to Nietzsche. The Superman, or Übermensch, is all about self-mastery and creating one's own values. Nietzsche argued that traditional morality, especially Christian morality, had turned into a herd morality that choked individual potential and creativity. The Superman rises above this by looking inward, affirming life, and using what Nietzsche called the will to power. This isn't really about power over others, but power over oneself. The drive to grow, to overcome, to create. This demands huge self-belief, a conviction that your own judgment and values are what matter most. The Superman isn't looking for anyone else's approval. He is the source of his own validation. He has to believe he can forge new paths and define new virtues, basically becoming a law unto himself. Comparing them, you immediately see a parallel in just how intense that self-belief is. Is Kanye's unwavering confidence a modern, perhaps louder take on the Superman's self-determined value system? Nietzsche didn't see the ego as some fixed thing, but as a dynamic dance of drives, where the strongest drive calls itself I. Could Kanye's God complex be seen as an extreme version of a dominant creative drive, a will to power pushing its vision with total conviction? Or does Kanye's very public declaration, his need for the world to recognize him as a god, move away from the more internally focused self-mastery Nietzsche might have pictured for the Superman? The Superman creates values rather than demanding a title. He creates, he becomes. He doesn't necessarily need to shout, "I am Superman," quite like Kanye proclaims, "I am a god," transcending norms and creating values. Kanye West has pretty much built his career on defying what's expected, from his early days challenging the dominant gangsta rap story with thoughtful, socially aware tracks like Jesus Walks, to shaking up the fashion world, to his often controversial public statements. Kanye consistently plays outside the usual lines. He doesn't just break rules, he tries to write new ones. His art, his Yeezy brand, even his Sunday service events, can look like attempts to set up new cultural and aesthetic values. He champions a specific vision of art, success, and even spirituality, often setting himself up as a leader, heralding a new era. He's openly said he doesn't follow crowds, which sounds a lot like Nietzsche's distaste for the herd. Nietzsche's Superman is, by his very definition, a breaker of old tablets, the established moral and societal rules, and a creator of new tablets. The Superman gets that traditional values are human-made, not handed down from on high, which means new values can be created. This is a radical act of freedom and creativity. For Nietzsche, this wasn't about chaos. It was about affirming life and creating values that boost human potential, moving beyond the narrow good and evil defined by the herd. The Superman is an artist of life itself, molding his own meaning and destiny. The comparison here is pretty striking. Both Kanye and the Nietzschean ideal are about moving beyond existing structures and setting up new values. Kanye's disruptions in music and fashion are clear attempts to create new aesthetic benchmarks. But how are their approaches different? Nietzsche's value creation is a deep philosophical quest, a reevaluation of all values after the death of God. Is Kanye's value creation on that same philosophical level, or is it more about artistic and cultural sway, maybe mixed with commercial success? While Kanye sets himself up as a challenger of norms, his actions are often seen through the lens of celebrity culture and personal branding. Does this water down the comparison or just show the modern world such a figure has to operate in? Nietzsche's Superman acts from an inner need, a will to overcome. Kanye's actions, while definitely impactful, are also performed on a very public, media-heavy stage. Is he truly forging new fundamental values, or is he just masterfully navigating and reshaping existing ones to fit his own design? Theme 3: Ego, Madness, and the Artistic Spark. Kanye West's journey hasn't just been public in its successes, but also in its struggles, especially with his mental health and bipolar disorder. He's talked openly about his manic episodes, sometimes linking them to periods of intense creativity. This, of course, feeds into that age-old discussion about the tortured artist, the idea that genius is somehow tied to madness. Those times when his ego seems to blow up to extreme levels, leading to controversial statements or behavior, are often talked about in relation to his mental state. So, the question becomes, where does that intense self-belief needed for groundbreaking art cross over into a delusion that could be damaging both personally and artistically? Is this perceived madness part of his artistic spark, or a side effect that just makes things more complicated? Some argue his openness has been really important for discussions around mental health, especially in hip-hop. Nietzsche also had a complicated relationship with what we might call madness, and he himself spiraled into a severe mental illness late in his life. But even before that, his philosophy explored the Dionysian, a concept that stands for ecstatic frenzy, intoxication, and the breaking down of individual limits, often set against the Apollonian ideal of order and reason. Nietzsche saw the creative genius as potentially linked to a willingness to face the abyss, to embrace hard truths that might look like madness to a conventional mind. The visionary, by definition, sees beyond the herd, and that can be an isolating, even destabilizing thing to experience. Nietzsche himself suggested that a spice of madness is necessary for creativity. This is where things get even trickier, and honestly, more fascinating. Both figures point to a possible link between extreme psychological states and creative output. For Kanye, his public talk about bipolar disorder and how it connects to his creative bursts is pretty direct. He's mentioned refusing medication at times, worried it would dull his creative spark, a sentiment that fits the mad genius idea, but also raises serious concerns. Nietzsche, on the other hand, looked at madness more philosophically, as a potential outcome or even a necessary part of radical self-overcoming and rejecting societal norms. So when we look at Kanye, are we seeing a modern version of that Dionysian force? An artist whose ego and perhaps manic energy fuel an undeniably innovative output? Or is the God complex a sign of illness that, while it might exist alongside creativity, also leads to self-sabotage and pushes him away from the very culture he wants to change? Nietzsche's Superman isn't necessarily mad in a clinical way, but he operates so far outside conventional understanding that he might seem that way to others. Is Kanye's self-proclaimed divinity a sign of this, or is it a misunderstanding of the power that comes with radical self-belief? That line between the visionary embrace of chaos and an actual descent into delusion is a very thin one. The showdown, synthesis, and nuance. So, after looking at these themes, where do we stand in this philosophical showdown? Is Kanye West a modern, if flawed, version of some aspects of Nietzsche's Superman? Or is his God complex more of a warning about the dangers of an ego left to run wild? There are definitely parallels, no doubt about it. Both Kanye and the Superman ideal champion radical self-belief, a rejection of the herd mentality, and a drive to create new values. Kanye's insistence on his own genius and his often disruptive way of approaching art and culture can feel like a contemporary echo of the Superman's will to power and revaluation of values. His willingness to publicly wrestle with his own psyche, even its darker or more chaotic sides, touches on Nietzschean ideas of embracing all of human experience, the Dionysian along with the Apollonian. However, the differences are just as important. Nietzsche's Superman is an ideal of profound self-overcoming, a philosophical figure born from a deep critique of morality and how we understand reality. It's an internal journey of creating meaning in a universe that offers none. While Kanye is undeniably influential and a creative powerhouse, his God complex often plays out very publicly, sometimes in a way that seems narcissistic, driven by a need for external approval that feels very different from the Superman's self-sufficiency. The Superman creates values. Kanye often seems more focused on asserting his own supreme value within the existing cultural framework, even if he's reshaping it. And it's worth remembering, Nietzsche's Superman is an aspirational figure representing the transcendence of humankind. It's not about literally declaring yourself a god, but about reaching a higher state of human potential. The public nature of Kanye's struggles and his blending of creative mania with divine status could be seen as a distortion, not an embodiment of Nietzschean ideals. The danger of ego, many would argue, is that it can lead to delusion, isolation, and an inability to genuinely connect with the world or with others. It can choke the very creativity it claims to fuel by stopping objective self-reflection and learning. Yet, you could also argue that a powerful ego, a strong sense of self-worth and mission is almost essential for any artist who wants to break new ground and handle the pressures and criticisms that come with innovation. Maybe it's not ego itself that's the problem, but the unchecked, unexamined, and deified version of it. What are your thoughts so far? Is Kanye's ego a destructive force or a necessary one for his level of artistry? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're finding this philosophical exploration engaging, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that makes you think. So, is ego the key to genius? Well, like with most big questions, it's not a simple yes or no. Kanye West's God complex and Nietzsche's Superman give us two compelling but very different pictures of the power and pitfalls of extreme self-belief. What this comparison shows us is that a strong internal drive, a conviction in one's unique vision, and a willingness to challenge norms really are vital parts of many kinds of genius. In that sense, a strong ego, meaning a resilient self-concept and a powerful will to create, can be a mighty engine. However, the God complex, as we see with Kanye, also highlights the razor's edge. When self-belief turns into an unshakable declaration of divinity, when the lines between confidence and delusion get blurry, and when the need for the world to confirm this godhood becomes all-important, the ego might switch from being a creative spark to a destructive inferno. Nietzsche's Superman, while radically individualistic, is ultimately about self-overcoming and creating new values for humanity, not necessarily about self-deification in the town square. It's about an internal sense of control and meaning, not just shouting your greatness from the rooftops. Perhaps the key isn't raw, unrestrained ego, but a calibrated ego, one that fuels ambition and resilience, but stays connected to self-awareness, to the ability to grow, and to a purpose beyond just glorifying oneself. The line between creative confidence and destructive narcissism, between the visionary and the merely provocative, is one that artists, and really all of us who try to create, have to constantly navigate. Ultimately, what this whole comparison seems to tell us is that while an ego whispering "you can do this" might be essential for genius, an ego that screams "I am a god" without deep self-reflection and responsibility might be its biggest downfall. The genius uses the ego. They aren't consumed by it. What other philosophical concepts or cultural figures would you like to see us explore? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to check out our other videos dissecting culture and ideas. Thanks for watching.